need to not only know how to solve it algebraically, we have to put our reasoning next to it. All right? So we're going to start off with, let me get my stuff. So the two-column proof is a common format used to organize proof. So we have one side that we have steps and one side that we have reasons for. So we have the statements. Or in this case, they're going to be our steps to solving our algebraic problem. Do you not have the notes? Then on the other side, we're going to have the reasons. Reasons why we can do that particular step. Well, the good thing is on that pink sheet, those first couple big chunk of stuff are going to be our reasons that we can do stuff. And we'll talk about this stuff in a later time, but what can we use? We can use properties. We can use definitions. We can use postulates. And we can use theorems. So we can use properties, definitions, postulates, and theorems. Right now, we're really just stuck in properties, and that's all we're going to stick with. We're just going to go algebraic proofs. We're going to take our test, and we're going to get to more geometric proofs. That's where you have to bring in the other ones with the postulates and our theorems in there. But we're going to start walking before we start running. Yeah?
What was the last two words?
You say you can't read my writing? Postulates and theorems. We haven't really talked about those yet. We'll talk about those. We talked about them briefly. We'll talk a lot more of them when we get to the geometric proofs. Basically, these postulates are things we taken as true, and theorems are going to be ones we actually prove are true. Because kind of like you have your Legos, you need to have something to start with. Those are our postulates. And then we build something bigger. Those are our theorems that we can use. All right, so we have postulates and theorems, but today we're just focusing on properties. All right, our first two-column proof, and we're going to start off with one that looks like this, where I'm going to fill in our statements. Your homework's not going to have this side in it. You're going to have to fill out this side on your own. So you actually have to walk through each step, step by step, to do it. We can't skip steps. You only can do one thing at a time. So I don't want to see we subtracted and multiplied all in the same step. We have to go step by step through this. So how proofs work is we are given something, and they tell you what you need to prove. So that's a nice thing. You know what x has to equal. So that's one nice thing. It gives you the answer, x equals 7. So when I solve for this, I need to get to x equals 7. Now, here's another nice thing about proofs. Everyone in this class should get this first part right. When you write a proof, your first step is to write your given, and the way you support it is, it was given to me. You just write given. That's on every single proof you write. So everyone in this class should at least get some points for knowing that. And you also know where it should end. It should end at x equals 7. Okay, so our first step is we write our given. It was written for us, and we wrote given for you. Our next step is, how did I get to step 1 to step 2? Don't shout it out. Just look at it. Look at it. How did I get from step 1 to step 2? Now, I'm going to add one more thing to that. We're going to say it's the addition property, and we're going to add one more thing to it. And you might want to add this to your pink sheet. We're going to write property of equality because we're adding to both sides of the equal sign. Did he get you wrong?
No, I did not.
So we're going to put addition property of equality. I'll go get it back. So addition property of equality. It was a trick. Mr. Alcorn. It's a test for my students so they didn't steal it. I like it.
No,
It
I'm
was
sorry.
good. No, you're good.
She punched me first.
Who always gets caught, though? It's always the second person. All right. Now, do we want to write property of equality every single time? I don't. Instead of property of equality, we're just going to put PO. Add PO. Addition, property of equality, because we are doing it across an equal sign. All right. What do I do from 2 to 3?
You
I divided. I divided both sides by 4, right? Now, you don't need to tell me what you divided by. You just have to say, well, Mr. Pabian, I used div PO. I used the division property of equality. Now, these aren't made to be super hard. Sometimes the hard part is going to be your algebra. So that's why if we're struggling on some things, we ask questions, right? Okay, let's go through another example. We should always have the first step right, even if it's not written for us. We write the first thing, we write given. And then we just look. So if it's given to us, we have to look to see what the other person did. It might not be the method that you would have used to solve it, but we have to look at what the other person did to solve it. So I look at, well, I got rid of the 2. How do I get rid of a 2 from the left-hand side? How do I get rid of a 2 from that side if it's a positive 2? Caroline? We subtract it. We subtract it from both sides, right? So we don't just put the subtraction property, we put subtraction PO. I subtracted both sides by 2. Hey guys, how is this -6 attached to this A right now? What's the sign between them? Division. What's the opposite of division? So what do I think I have to do to get the next step? I need to multiply both sides by 6. It's a multiplication property of equality. Crushing through it. Hey, this can be as easy or as hard as you want to make it on yourself, kind of. Multiplication property of equality. Okay, the next one has a new thing. Right? It's not just addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. I did the same thing. I wrote my given. What's my next step? I use the this distributive property, right? I couldn't say it. The distributive property. We do not need property of equality on that one. The only time we need, and this is where I'd put this on my notes. You know how we have that addition property, subtraction property, and multiplication and division property? Those are the only 4 we need the PO on. So the first 4 do you need to put property of equality, because that's the only one that happens on both sides of the equal sign. The distributive property just happens. It doesn't happen on both sides of the equal sign. So that's why I'd have that on my pink sheet, that the first 4 you need property of equality. I don't see a lot of people writing it, but that's on you. But the first 4, we need that PO attached to it. Otherwise, I won't accept it as full credit. So the first 4, that is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, I need that PO after it. All right, so my next one. Notice how I'm doing it on both sides of the equal sign. That's why we need that property of equality. And am I adding 27 to both sides, or am I subtracting 27 from both sides? I'm subtracting, because it's the opposite of adding 27. I subtract 27 from both sides. Property of equality. I'm going to notice that 18 is attached by multiplication. What undoes multiplication? Division. So we'd use our division property of equality. Hey, for those of us that are a little weaker on algebra, it might be a good idea to pay attention to what we're doing. Notice how we use subtraction and addition before we use our multiplication and division. That's how it works when you are solving. You always look for the things you can add or subtract first, and then you switch over to multiplication and division, and except in rare occasions. And we'll talk about the ones that are kind of rare occasions. We're not going to go through all of them. if that's what you're worried about. What was that? Your homework is pretty short. It's shorter than the lesson. Yeah. That's it. That's it, yeah. Okay, our next one. Why are you complaining about that? It's 2 pages. What are you guys worried about? I'm so confused. All right. So our next one, we have 6x plus 7 equals 8x minus 17. So this comes up with the new thing that I have x's on both sides. So reminder that when you have x's on both sides, you need to get all the x's on one side, and you need to get all the numbers on the other side. You need to do this in 2 different steps. So one step must be getting your x's to one side, and one step needs to be getting your constants to one side. So if you notice, and this is typically what I would do, we know to move the x's to one side, I either need to subtract 8x from both sides, or I need to subtract 6x from both sides. I will always subtract 6x because I don't want to create a negative number that I don't need to. And that's what they did as well. They subtracted 6x because they realized, hey, if I subtract 6x from both sides, I will still have a positive 2x. So they used the subtraction property of equality. Then to get the 17 to the other side, did we add or did we subtract 17 from both sides? We added it. We added 17 to both sides. And once again, I think it helps if you just write the intermediate steps. It just helps you realize that it's not subtraction, it is the addition property of equality. And then I divided both sides by 2. That shouldn't be a new thing for us. That to get rid of 2x, I divide both sides by 2. Rip, rip. And I come up with 12 equals x by doing the division property of equality. However, this one has a 5th step. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have to put x on the... So it has to match your prove statement. Oh. Am I going to take off points? Probably not. What I typically do is I give you extra points. So I give you like a bonus half point if you do this last step. So it's worth doing. So it didn't say find 12 equals x. It says make it x equals 12. That's what it says prove. Your last statement has to match this. How do I flip it? Kennedy? I use the symmetric property. It's not hard to do because you have your sheet in front of you, right? But the more you look at it, and you understand what's on that sheet, the easier stuff becomes. If you're not looking at that sheet and you're just like a blob in the class, and you're just like, I'll just write down what Mr. Pabian's writing down, then this stuff becomes more difficult. But you're just like, I'll look at my sheet. Now next time you'll know the symmetric property. So we got symmetric property, which was a good find. It is not property of equality. It is just symmetric property. All right, I would like you to try the longer one here. So it's got lots of stuff in it. I would like you to try this next one. Creative property, we're good with that? Let's look what happened on the next step. Did I add or subtract to both sides of the equal sign? No, I combined like terms, right? I took this 4x and this negative 7x, and I put them together. They're all on the same side, right? So we have 2 things we can do here. We could say we combine like terms, or we can just put simplify. We cannot use the addition property of equality because I'm not adding something both sides. It is okay. It is okay. I didn't go over that. I purposely didn't go over that because hopefully it sticks in your head. That if I just give you answers, we forget it. Emily, if we need to stand, we can stand. So we got simplify. Now, remember, if I do the steps for you, you can't pick what you would do. Because normally I'd probably add, I would probably add 3x to both sides. It'd make sense. It'd keep things positive though, right? But if you notice, we get down to negative 15x. So they didn't do maybe what you wanted to do. Instead, they subtracted 12x from both sides, which means that should be our subtraction property of equality. Yes. Okay, so I use the subtraction property of equality, and I get that negative 15x. Then it looks like I added 14 to both sides, which would be my addition property of equality. And then it finally looks like I divided negative 15 on both sides. And I'll be honest, we did two things in one step. We divided and we simplified, but we can do that in our calculator. That's fine. We can type that in our calculator and come up with our complete answer there. So that would just be our division property of equality. Okay, minus me tricking you into having a step that you didn't know how to do. Can we do this stuff? Okay, I honestly think it's harder when I give you the steps because it kind of tricks you. It does, because you're like, what did Mr. Pabian do? Not what would I do? So more traditionally, we have a quiz on Thursday. We will have two of these. We'll have one where I filled it in. They're short. And we'll have one where we have to fill in all the blanks ourselves. Okay? So we'll have one that looks like this, where I just give you a given and I have a proof. Well, we should all get the first step. The first step is writing your given and saying it's given. So we'll do 3x plus 1 equals negative 14. I'll put a 1 by that because that's my first step. And I'll put a 1 by this one and put it's my given. Yeah, Grayson. Can you wait? She gets back. Okay, if I was solving this algebraic expression, I need to get the x's alone, but I have to do my subtraction and addition first. Quentin, you doing okay? Okay. How do I get rid of the positive 1? I subtract. I do a minus. So we're going to go ahead and I like the intermediate steps. I like to tell myself what I did. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. So I have 3x equals a negative 15. That would be my subtraction property of equality. Oh boy, I'm stuck. What do I do next to solve for x? I use division. Yeah. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Now notice I don't need to tell the person I divided by 3. I'm going to make a little note to myself that I divided by 3. That would be x equals a negative 5. I use the division property of equality. Did I fill out all the boxes? Did I get to where I needed to? I'm going to give you more boxes than you need sometimes. A lot of times. Because I don't know how you're going to solve it. You might pick a more convoluted way where all of a sudden you have the x on the other side or something. I try to give you, you might fill up all the boxes, but you're not necessarily going to fill up all the boxes. So I don't want you to get to a quiz or a test and be like, I don't know what I'm doing because I didn't fill up all the boxes. So we might not fill out all the boxes. All right, what's my first step always? Write out the given, and our reason is given. Get that right every single time. So our number 1 is writing 2 times x minus 9 equals negative 10. My first step is given. I'm going to use the distributive property. Thank you. So we're going to do the distributive property. Nailed it. And my distributive property is distributing that 2 to both things. I like to draw an arrow on both of these. I know a lot of us are lazy and we don't like writing that. I promise you that arrow can save you. You're multiplying everything in that parentheses by 2. So instead of x, I'm going to have 2 x's. Instead of negative 9, I'm going to have negative 18 equals a negative 10. Do next. Yep, anyone in the front group.
So basically you should put the 18 and put it in 10. So basically addition.
Addition property of equality. We're going to add 8. Does everyone agree with that? We'll add 18 to both sides. Do we see that? Okay, so we're going to add 18 to both sides. That'll be our addition property of equality. Sorry, Delilah. So we're using our addition property of equality. Hey, if we're terrible at adding and stuff, just use your calculator. We're supposed to bring a calculator every day, right? So even if we stumble on small numbers, I'd rather us not spend 18 hours trying to figure out what negative 10 plus 18 is, and we just plug in and get the right answer. But we should have, whether it be 2x equals negative 10 plus 18. That's the same thing as 18 minus 10. So that should just be 8. Back group. Any one of you three? Sorry. Any one of you three. What do I do next?
Division.
We're going to use the division property of equality. We'll divide by 2. So we'll have x equals 4. That's our division property of equality. All right. So those we should be able to do. If we can't do these simple ones, let's come and get help, okay? Let's come and get help. We have a test next week. We have to be able to solve these because these are just going to get more complicated than this, as you'll notice as we kind of keep going. So if we're struggling with the algebra, let's make sure we're asking questions. Oh, hang on. I assume it was important, right? Okay. The next one's a little trickier. The first good thing is we can always get our given right. We can write our 5y minus 1 divided by 2 equals 7. That is my given. Who knows what my first step needs to be? There's only one thing correct that you can do.
Maybe
Multiply by 2. Remember we did a whole bunch of these problems on that review, the algebra review? If you did that algebra review, you would have realized I put like 4 or 5 on that algebra review because you need to know this. Right now, this stuff right here is stuck. You can't do anything with this stuff until you get rid of the denominator. You are dividing by 2. So to get rid of dividing by 2, you need to multiply by 2. So my first step is the multiplication property of equality. Now, if you don't know that, pay attention to what happens next. The 2's are going to turn to just 1, and everything in the numerator is just going to fall down. So your next step is going to look like this. It's going to be 5y minus 1 equals 7. By multiplying by 2, we get rid of the denominator. You got to know that skill. Multiplying by 2 gets rid of that denominator. More than likely, you're going to have one of those on the test that you need to know. You need to know how to get rid of a denominator. That's an important skill for everyone to have. After that, you should probably know what to do next. We should add 1. Does that sound right? Okay, so we're going to add 1. That will give me 5y equals 7. My addition property of equality. I don't know. Caroline.
It should be 5y equals 8.
Oh, equals 8. Okay, cool. I should have been able to catch that because I put the plus 1, but if you don't write this stuff, you're more likely to not catch it. And guess what? If you put a plus 1 on both sides, then you put 7, you're going to get more points than if you just go 5y equals 7, because then I don't know what you did. That's where it's nice to have those little intermediate steps. All right, what's my last step? Shout it out. Division. Yeah, we'll divide both sides by 5. That should give me y equals 8 divided by 5. Is that what I was supposed to get out? No. Uh-oh. Must have made a mistake somewhere else. But here's the nice thing. There's a purposeful mistake again. I kept trying to mess this one up. Savannah? I did multiply the 7 by 2.
Should be 14.
But here's the nice thing about that. Yeah, it should be 14, right? Perfect. But here's, it'll become, yeah. But here's the nice thing about this. You could catch a mistake because I told you what the answer is supposed to be. So now I can start looking up here and going, I multiplied by 2. Oh, I didn't multiply by 2. I have the mark here, but I didn't do it. That's why it's nice to have these marks. I didn't multiply by 2, so I should change that 7 to a 14. But I still have that plus 1 to tell me, you were saying it needs to be 15 here, right? So we change this to 15. Oh, and now I have 15 divided by 5, which equals 3. But I didn't need to change anything over here. I just needed to go, came up with the wrong number. Let's go back up and track that down. That's where it's nice to have those intermediate steps as well. Because it's much harder to find when you just did everything in your head. All right, I think we're going to skip 9 for right now. Let's just do 10 and 11 on our own or within your group. Just for time-wise, we'll skip number 9. Let's try 10 and 11 on our own. Yes. Yeah. On your it's important that we have all of these skills, these algebra skills. Once again, if you are struggling in the algebra, come get help. All right, so my first step is always writing my given. So we should have did -8, w plus 1 equals -5, w plus 10, bless you. And that would be my given. Your next step should have been the distributive property. Whether you did it correct or not, we'll find out. For the distributive property, remember distributive property is just multiplying. So my second step should be distributing that -8 to that w, which would give me a -8w. Then we have a -8 times a 1, which would be giving me -8, equals a -5 times w, which would be a -5w. And then we'll have a -5 times 10, which would give me a -50. Now what happens next is up to you. What happens next is up to you. Because we have multiple things we can do. We need to get all of the w's on one side and all of the numbers on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to add 8 to both sides. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 8 to both sides. Because I saw several people do this, so I'm going to stick with the one I saw the most. I saw people trying to add 8 to both sides, which would then give me -8w equals -5w minus 42. Don't get this stuff wrong if we could just plug it in our calculator. I did see people do the addition wrong here. Plug in your calculator and get it correct. All right, so I use the addition property of equality, our ADPO. My step 4 is to get the w's all on one side, so that probably means I'm going to add 5w to both sides. That's going to give me -8 plus 5 turns into a -3w equals a -42. That last step is going to be, what did I say, addition property of equality again. My final step should be dividing by a -3. Which will give me w equals a negative divided by negative is a positive. So it'd be a positive 14. Let's do math better. Let's check. Oh, yep, that's right. W equals 14. And that would be done with the division property of equality. DivPo. Our last one's obviously the most difficult. You have so many extra steps in there. Those that attempted it and got it, awesome job. Hey guys, we have to try something. Some of us kind of stood there and just let our sheets be blank until I filled it out. You're not going to do well on a quiz or test if you're not challenging yourself to try things. The first thing we should have put is our given. Our given should be 14 minus 2x plus 8 equals 5x minus 3x minus 34. Oh, that's a long one. That is my given. I can tell that we need to distribute something. So my next step needs to be the distributive property. This is probably the hardest one to do, distributive property, because of one small fact. First of all, the 14 is not being distributed. That just hangs out front. It's the -2 that's being distributed. I'm going to circle the entire -2 and make sure it gets distributed to both those things. -2 times x is a -2x. -2 times 8 is a -16. Equals 5x. Here's the thing that trips people up. Do you see this negative out front? You have to distribute that negative. It's a -1 out front. So you are distributing this negative, which just switches the signs that you see. So when I distribute this negative, instead of 3x, I'm going to have a minus 3x. But then the negative gets distributed here. And I'm going to flip that sign to a positive. Correct. We'll switch that sign to a positive 34. Once again, that's our distributive property. Now, do you see the things that we can combine on each side? Do you see this 14 and -16? And this 5x and this -3x? We're going to simplify this before we start moving things over. So like I said, I'm looking at, let me highlight this in green. I'm looking at this 14 and this -16 can be combined. And I'm looking at this 5x and this -3x can be combined. So I have 14 minus 16. 14 minus 16, if you need to, just plug in your calculator, but you should get out a -2. So we should have a -2x minus 2 equals 5x minus 3x is 2x plus 34. That is just, I simplified. I just simplified it. Now, we can either move the x's to the left side, or I can move the x's to the right side. It doesn't matter, just at the end I might have to flip it. I'm going to go ahead and, I think we have the room for it. Let me just check. Do that. Maybe not. I'm going to go ahead and move this 2x to this side. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. Might not been your first choice, but that's what we're going to go with. So I have -4x, because I want to deal with negatives because some of us struggle with negatives, so let's just do it. If I subtract 2x on both sides, I now have -4x minus 2 equals, well, these just cancel out, and I'm left with 34. I use the subtraction property of equality. Now I need to move this 2 to the other side. The opposite of a -2 is a +2, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. My fifth step is going to be a -4x equals 36. And that was my, what did I do? I used addition property of equality. And it looks like my last step is going to be my division property of equality. So I'm going to divide both sides by -4. And that's going to give me x equals a -9. And that would be my division property of equality. Now, will all of our problems be that difficult? No. What I usually put on a test is I put like one that I kind of filled out. And then we kind of build the difficulty and we have a couple hard ones. So if you know how to do the basic algebra stuff, we can get some points, but we need to figure out complex problems like this. We just need to. We are geometry students, sophomores, for the most part in this class. I think everyone is, except for Karis. But we need to be able to solve problems like this. So one more time, here's my plea to you. You have a test next week. We have a quiz on Thursday. The quiz on Thursday is not going to have a super complicated one. Thursday, we're looking at ones that we kind of started off with. I just want to make sure that you can do the general idea. Like, can you do this kind of thing? Can you do steps and show me something? The other thing that might be on the quiz is if you look at your homework, do you see 1 through 9? 1 through 9? We'll have like 5 of those. We'll have like 5 of those types of problems or so, where I'm giving you something that happens and you have to be able to support it. Now, I'll notice on 1 through 9, do you see how you have like a bank next to it? You have like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're supposed to fill in the letter. If you can't find the letter, because sometimes it sucks to have to find the thing you're looking for on the right-hand side, and you got that nice pink sheet that says what everything is. If you want to, in that little blank, just put addition, po, or substitution, you can put that in the box if you can't find the particular letter for it. And that'll be the same on the quiz too. You can just write what it is rather than having to search through the thing. Okay, so that's your quiz. Your quiz is going to be a few of those. One short proof where I gave you all of the statements you got to put in your reasons, and one where you got to fill the entire thing. And that's your quiz on Thursday. Yes?